Okay, so we have a couple of animations. We have this one here that is with the very long shadow cast. We might even do it one more time, even a little bit longer. So let's go make this one the current animation. Right, it's right in there. Let's scrub through that so we can see that it's there, and we know we are applying one more time the exact same render parameters. Apply that. And even that one I might want to do one more time, a little bit longer. Apply one more time. You see how we can just keep accumulating, and whenever it sees some dark pixels, they'll also get carried away by this blur. And so I think this one we can now let go. We could possibly adjust something like the contrast, the value adjustments here, so that, for instance, here, if it's too dark, we could make it a little bit brighter, or less contrasty, something like this. And then perhaps that would have us focus on just the shadow. The airplane can always be rendered separately if we need it at full dark, but the shadow itself would be nice to potentially have in its own right way here. So there's a couple of ways to work with that. I'm going to go focus on compositing things now, and that's also something we can do here. What we'll do is we'll load the background, right? and and then we'll look at, well, how do we get this animation into it, right? Well, we could do one thing, which is to flag it as the background image, right? So you can use it as an animated swap image, we call that. The swap image is sort of the backside of your canvas, or just another image buffer containing an image, and this one is an image sequence, and we can say, yeah, let's use that as the animated swap, right? So we don't see the animated swap here unless we enable swap mixing. And there's an option here on the sidebar. If you have the sidebar here on the right, let me go get these guys out of the way. Here is the sidebar, and there's an option, the three previews icon at the top. The rightmost upper right corner is the one for layer mixing. When you click that, it blends it together with the swap image, right? So as you scrub through that, you actually see that animation of the airplane with the shadow that's cast in it. You see those two combined together. Now it's a little bit too intense, and you might want to do something about it. Like, you can right click on this preview to change the layer mode. Maybe the screen mode is a little bit better. Nope, not so much. Maybe, so I think by default we use multiply. So you could use that. You could do subtract. That's not going to help it. It's subtracting the wrong thing. We would need to invert it first before we subtract. So there's a couple of ways to combine that. Maybe color burn. Um, I think generally I like the multiply, but in this case here it's just a little bit too intense, right? So there's obviously something we might want to do about adjusting the level of that multiply operation, the level of the pixel values we have in this image sequence here. And so what I would do is perhaps work on that first. Let's go store this. Excuse me, let's restore that and see how we can simply make this a little bit less intense, a little bit less opaque black here, right? Well, it's simply a matter of increasing the brightness, and that's all across the entire animation. Don't even need to animate it with the keyframes. We could, but what we could also do is simply go to the animation adjust, excuse me, filter adjust value, and there we applied on a single image, right? So for a single image, we could go something like this, less on the contrast, or a bit more on the brightness. Yeah, that's still very dark there, and we might want to actually use another trick, which is to add some value, add some color. So perhaps something like, um, let's see, let's get rid of this. Yeah, maybe that's throwing us off. Yeah, I was still doing the layer blending with the swap. So, and this one is the swap. That's why. Okay. So I'm looking at just the image now. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Okay, and so now let's do, for instance, value here. There. Okay, now it's very faint, right? The airplane is still there. The shadow, though, is far less intense than what it was before. All right, so let's do a little bit brightness add, less gamma. That's the ticket. Okay. Okay. So we now have only sort of a faint hint of the a slight hint of this shadow. We don't want it that opaque, that dark. Yeah, something like this. Okay, so I'm going to apply that not on just this one frame, but the whole animation. Okay, so now you see the airplane, but you also see the shadow in a much less intense level here. And then soon enough will be, it's not going to show the preview of the entire rendering yet. Sometimes it just can't do this fast enough. So as it's going through it, there you go. Okay, so now we have an animation that we will want to keep. Let's store this one. And you might say, well, yeah, but the shadow is nicer, but the airplane is almost grayish transparent too. How about we recomposite that? And sure enough, we can, because we still have this one here too. All right, let's not forget that we still have the original that didn't have. Let's go minimize the others here. This one we don't need. This one we don't need. I will keep them. And but we can composite these two together. So let's take a look at how to composite that. We have this one here that we're seeing right now. I'm gonna flag this one as the animated swap, and together, well, we don't see anything unless we enable swap blending. There you go. Now you can see the airplane is fully opaque again, dark, and the shadow is still at its lighter level. So that's what we want to do. And combining that is one thing you can do here. When you right click, you can say merge with swap, and then it does that frame for frame. Every single frame will do that. Right? So that's a quick way to do a blending of the animated image sequence that you see in the main animation with the animated swap image that we have tagged here from this stored copy. So you can have frame for frame blending of the images. Another way to do that, and I will undo this, another way to do that is to say, well, I have this animation in the swap. I have this current animation. I want to combine the two together. And you can do that here under the filters. You can go and combine swap. Right? And so in this case, for instance, you might say, let's go multiply. There. Right? So that's done on this frame. Do you want to do this on all frames? Yes, you normally would do that, but I'm going to undo because there's one more other technique that's also useful that I would like to show. And then you can pick the one you like. And that is, again, to use the keyframer. Right? If you use the keyframer, you get the timeline editor with the keyframes on the frames. You get to additionally also control perhaps some extra parameters. Actually, I don't think so in this case. If we do, where is it down here? There's combine or swap. There are some options like multiply, but it doesn't have a level of how much combining to do. Right? So it's doing the same thing. But there are some options here that do have, like the combine with swap mix buffers. That one has a buffer mix, and that's pretty nice, right? Because with that you can see here there's a little bit more adjusting you can do too. Right, so you could actually start with that other one that had a fairly strong shadow and simply adjust how much of that you want to actually keep. It's blending one frame with the other, right? The main frame with the swap frame, and both have the same white background, so you don't see any difference here. But here you can see either you see the frame that's in the swap or the frame that's in the main image or somewhere in between, and that's a really nice transition to also be able to choose. And more importantly, if you need it at various levels at changing levels of this mix buffer here, you can do that because you're on the keyframe. You're on the timeline here, you can keyframe it. So you could say here, I don't need any reduction of that. It's faint enough, we don't need to reduce it anymore. So let's keyframe it to that. But then here it's too intense. Okay, let's frame it away and get a little bit more into the original that didn't have the shadow cast. And then here it's perhaps okay to bring it back a little stronger and keyframe it. So you see how you can use the keyframes to change whatever parameters you have here. I think there will be up to 6 parameters.